What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. And today we're talking the November 9th, 2020 edition of Raw Talk, as always being hosted by Charlie Caruso and R-Truth. The first thing to discuss on the show, as you would probably expect if you saw Raw on Monday, that terrible segment where the 24/7 championship was traded back and forth, not even back and forth, but between like 7 or 8 different people. Tucker won it at one point, Lindsay Dorado, Gran Metalik, Drew Gulak, Akira Tozawa, literally everyone in the ring, even fucking Eric of the former Viking Raiders, won the 24/7 championship in that segment. And then obviously it ended with R-Truth walking out as the new 24/7 champion for a 44th time, I believe he said here. Now, I might be off on that, but I'm pretty sure it's the 44th time he has won that title. Just throw it in the trash. It's a complete waste. So they do preview next week's 2 title matches. They got the graphic wrong the first time. Charlie was talking about Drew and Randy, even though the graphic for the New Day versus the Hurt Business was up, which was funny. But yeah, we are getting Drew and Randy next week for the WWE Championship, as well, as I just said, as the New Day versus the Hurt Businesses, Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander, for the Raw Tag Team titles. And R-Truth even asks her, who do you think's going to but who do you think's going to win that WWE Championship match? And she said, well, Randy just won it, so it's hard to not go against, it's hard to not go with, whatever. She said she was picking Randy here, is basically what I'm trying to say. It's hard to not go with him just because he's only been champion for a couple of weeks. He's at his most dangerous right now. She's going with Orton. But I could definitely see a scenario where McIntyre wins the belt back, so we get Drew and Roman at Survivor Series instead of Randy and Roman, which should be good, but Drew and Roman, for me, is the match that I think would really, not sell that show, but would be a much more compelling main event, in my opinion. So, the first guest they have on are I was going to say Matt Riddle. It's just Riddle now, which is incredibly dumb. And Keith Lee. You had to know this was coming, and so it begins. R-Truth refers to Matt Riddle as Riddler, because his name is just Riddle now, so he calls him Riddler at one point. You knew this had to come. It was like when they made Chad Gable Shorty G. They had Chad Gable, then called him Shorty Gable. You had to know the Shorty G part was coming. You have to know that Riddler is coming at some point too, which I hate to even fucking say that, but it's inevitable at this point. So, on a more serious note, Keith Lee, who was there with Matt Riddle, of course, and I'm going to call him Matt Riddle because that's what his fucking name is. He called Matt Riddle a machine. Obviously, they have a lot of chemistry and history from their days, not only in NXT, but even beyond that on the independent scene and Evolve, Progress, promotions like that. And then Riddle also praises the Raw lineup. They got them two, AJ Styles, Braun Strowman, and specifically Sheamus, who has done practically everything that there is to do in WWE, short of becoming the Universal Champion and the Intercontinental Champion. And Lee hypes up their big Raw win as they beat 2 former world champions in Braun Strowman and Sheamus. They have 5 world titles between them. Braun, a former Universal Champion. Sheamus, a former World Heavyweight Champion and 3-time WWE Champion. That's a pretty big win for them on Raw, as Lee and Riddle beat Strowman and Sheamus in tag team action. So Lee says that Team SmackDown should not be underestimated, and it's also not complete yet either. They do have Jey Uso, Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, and Baron Corbin, King Corbin, whatever. That's a pretty stacked team in its own right, and they have one more member to go. Probably Big E, I would have to take a guess. Come Friday's SmackDown, I assume they'll determine that. And he says that regardless of how good that team is and how stacked they are, our team is more stacked, and we'll be ready for them. The next guest they have on is Nikki Cross, who obviously interacted with Alexa Bliss in the back this week on the show. She said she tried everything, and that was when they had the whole ultimatum, or she had the ultimatum to Alexa Bliss. It's either me or The Fiend, and obviously she's going with The Fiend. Why the fuck would she go with Nikki Cross, who she won a couple of tag titles with? Yeah, that's great and all, but, I mean, who cares? Yeah, she's like, oh, we were tag team champions together, we're best friends. Obviously, The Fiend is doing more for Alexa Bliss at this point than Nikki Cross is. So, I mean, is her choice really all that surprising? You know what I mean? So, Nikki Cross actually blames herself, and she acknowledges the fact that she pushed Alexa Bliss down to the ground a couple of months ago on SmackDown. Remember when she failed to win the SmackDown Women's Championship and she got really frustrated, so she shoved Alexa Bliss down at least once or twice backstage, to the point where it looked like they were turning Nikki Cross heel and not Alexa. So she acknowledged that, thankfully, because she said how everyone's blaming her, and she said, no one blames me more than myself. So at least she acknowledged that, which I appreciated. And then Charlie questions if all the supernatural stuff is real, and it's a really dumb thing to say. And Cross doesn't confirm or deny that, but she does say that Wyatt has done something to her, and that love always wins. Love's going to win no matter what, and that she's going to win back Alexa Bliss in the end. It made it sound like they were lovers or something, but there's no romantic relationships, I don't believe, involved in this angle. That's all left to the fucking Buddy Murphy and Rollins and Aaliyah bullshit. But anyway, she said love will always win, which is whatever. So the last guest they have on is Drew McIntyre, who said he's feeling great going into next week's WWE Championship rematch with Randy Orton. He's confident, he's ready to reclaim that championship next week on the show. He does acknowledge, a lot like Nikki Cross, his mistake, that being that he went to the top of the cell at Hell in the Cell, they fell through the table at ringside. That was really what cost him, he felt, and that's what caused him to lose the WWE Championship. But he promises to win it back next week and then go on to face Roman Reigns at Survivor Series to represent Raw. He also addresses The Fiend, who is not on Raw this week, unfortunately. The Fiend and Alexa Bliss have been one of, if not the best part of Raw for the last month. Ever since they came over a month ago, they've been the best part about the show. Alexa Bliss was on the show, as I mentioned earlier in that backstage segment with Nikki Cross, but The Fiend was nowhere to be seen. I don't know why. Maybe they just wanted to give him the week off, which is fine. You don't want to have him on the show every week. It's going to overdo the whole Firefly Funhouse thing after a while, so that was probably smart. But after he mentioned that kind of made it clear to me, okay, will they actually do a title change right before the big pay-per-view? It's very possible. We've seen it before. AJ Styles beat Jinder Mahal for the WWE Championship right before Survivor Series 2017, and Daniel Bryan actually beat AJ Styles to win back that exact same WWE Championship right before Survivor Series 2018. So it's very possible we see the same thing happen next week, because Randy and Roman on paper, as I said earlier, not exactly, I don't want to say it's not a marquee match, but it's not as big as Drew and Roman would be, in my opinion. The heel versus heel dynamic doesn't exactly work in that scenario. That being said, I could very well see a scenario come next Monday where The Fiend gets involved in the match and costs Drew the championship, probably by DQ. I don't see Orton pinning Drew again, probably to set up a triple threat for the TLC pay-per-view next month. But he does say, as dangerous as Orton is right now, he claims to be more dangerous than he's ever been. Drew himself is more comfortable than he's ever been, which is why he's ready to become WWE Champion again next week on Raw. So that was pretty much the episode, a standard 25-minute episode. Not a lot to write home about this show. The Lee and Riddle were very clearly having a great time with R-Truth and Charlie, which was cool to see. No one really said anything of note on this episode. No great promos. Just kind of recap from Raw and preview for next week, which I guess is what the show is for. Nothing overly must-see or entertaining, although, like I said, Lee and Riddle with Charlie and Truth was very good. But other than that, a pretty ho-hum show. Not a bad show. Definitely better than the whole Peyton, Royce, and Lacey Evans crap from last week, which was terrible. But this show I thought was solid. So check it out right now, the WWE Network Raw Talk for November 9th, 2020. And check out the playlist below for more Raw Talk reviews right here on the channel. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. I'm Graham G. Matthews. Have a great week, guys, and I'll catch your ass down the road.